course. So the present government, like no other government in the past, has shown a political will to actually implement UCC. So the 2019 manifesto of BJP government, it did specifically talk about UCC. So when the government actually shows the political will, why not we, so-called learned law people, why not we discuss about the UCC in depth? So these are my primary reasons that why I chose this particular topic. Now, what is my objective? So, in this 1 hour lecture, my objective is not at all to influence your opinion as to whether there should be a UCC or there should not be a UCC. My only objective of giving this lecture is to make you think. I really want you to brood over the topic whether we should have a UCC or not. So tomorrow, after COVID-19, if there's a UCC law passed by the BJP government, and people are going out on the streets and protesting for or against the topic, you should at least have a well-informed decision. You should not be standing in favor or anti the bill without having enough reasons for the same. So my objective is to make you think. So I don't want that by the end of an hour, somebody says that he or she does not concur with me. Well, that is not even my motive. So that's my objective. Now, let's begin this by understanding the very meaning of Article 44 as to what does it say. I'm sure we all have read it during our law courses, but then let's again try to do it. So Article 44 clearly says the state shall endeavor to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. Simple in the language. Now here, I think we should focus on two different expressions to understand the concept better. The first one is uniform civil code. Now, what exactly do we understand by this? Now there are different interpretations possible. One, what do you mean by uniform? क्या हमारा uniform का मतलब ये है that all the religions, all the minorities should have a law which should be same, or should it be common? So uniform का मतलब आप same बोल रहे हो in terms of the letter, that the letters written in the law of the personal law of these communities should be exactly the same. Is that what you mean? Or what you mean is the letters in the law might be different for different communities' personal laws, but the spirit should be same. So what exactly is the meaning of uniform here is something that we as lawyers must ponder over. That is my first submission. Now the second one is that the endeavor to secure. So the language says the state shall endeavor to secure a UCC. Now, securing a UCC simply means that you should try to have a uniform civil code at the table. It nowhere says that once you have a UCC, you have to enforce it also rigidly like any other law. So it is merely giving a directive to the state that in future, you may come up with a UCC. However, to enforce it is not an obligation upon you. Right? So we have to understand the whole UCC concept, thinking about these two things primarily, whether uniform means same law or different law, but common or same in the spirit. And second, whether it should be only secured or it should also be enforced. Now, when we talk about uniform civil code, a lot of us are confused as in, whether we do not have any civil law common already in the place. So guys, we already know हमारा जो 90% of the civil law है, that is already uniform in the country. So when we are saying that under Article 44, the state has a mandate to come up with UCC, so we already have a civil law which is uniform. You talk about Transfer of Property Act, you talk about Succession Act, you talk about Sales of Goods Act, you talk about Indian Contract Act, CPC. These are all civil laws, and these are all uniformly, equally applicable throughout the country, irrespective of your religion. You have to follow it. Then why there's a lot of hue and cry around UCC? Because the civil code, 90% you can say, is already uniformly made and already made applicable. You talk about the criminal law, that is already there and it's uniformly applicable. Then what exactly in Article 44 we are trying to bring in, stating that we need a uniform civil code? So basically, we're trying to focus upon the 10% untouched provisions, which are the personal laws. So for now, we have different religious and minority communities, like we've got Parsis, we've got Christians, Muslims, so they've got their own personal laws, which is still untouched by the legislature, except for the Hindus, of course. So that is something we want to legislate upon. So we have to be very clear what is the intention of the state. क्योंकि हम जो सिविल कोड आर्टिकल 44 के बारे में इतना बोलते हैं, तो आर्टिकल 44 has already been made use of. We've got enough civil laws uniformly applicable already. It's only about the personal laws that we want to focus upon. So that's what I wanted to clear about Article 44 in terms of its meaning. Now, I want to talk about here something that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had said about the meaning of the term uh, enforcement of this law, whether the UCC, if the future parliament makes, whether it should only be secured or it should be enforced also. So during the Constituent Assembly debates, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had said that if in future a parliament comes up with a uniform civil code, the application of the law should be made voluntary. It means, so even if a UCC comes, it should not be binding on all the people across different religions at the first place. They should be given some time. It's like a cooling off period. Let them get accustomed to the principles, and then only they will be enforced. They will be asked to follow the law. Here, he also quoted Shariat law. He said, giving time to the communities to get adapted to the law, it's not a new concept. Other countries have also done it, including India. For instance, when the Shariat law of 1937 was enacted by the British government, the law clearly said that this law is made for the Muslims, though, but the Muslims, they have been given time, so it is their choice if they want to be bound by it or not. And the Muslims then who wanted to be bound by the Shariat law, they had to go to the concerned officer. They had to make a declaration that they want to be bound by it, and that is how the law will be applicable. So even if now we come up with something called UCC, we should keep this thing in our mind that it should be made voluntary. Out of nowhere, we have a law, and then we are asking all the religious communities to just follow it in letter and spirit will actually not be a very good option. Now, the next thing I want to discuss with why UCC? I mean, we do want it, but what are the purposes that it might serve? So there are different claims for it. The first claim, which is the most sensible to me, to most of you, I think it would be, is that it is going to bring more gender just laws. तो अगर UCC पास होता है तो अभी जितने भी पर्सनल लॉज हैं wherein we are discriminating against women specifically, so those things will go, and we'll have a law which will be more equal, which will be based on equity and equally applicable to men and women. So agar hum is ground ki baat kare, that there will be gender just laws, there will be no more inequality on the basis of gender, and then there will be end to social injustice, then it makes sense that we talk about UCC. The second claim which says how that UCC ko lane se there will be national integration, I think here just pause a little and think. अगर यूसीसी को लाने से ही नेशनल इंटीग्रेशन होती है, एक देश एक कानून, so we already have so many laws at place which are uniformly applicable throughout. CPC है ना, CRPC है, IPC है, we have all these civil legislations. Have they been able to bring in the national integration we've been looking for? तो अगर इतने कानून नेशनल इंटीग्रेशन नहीं लेकर आ पाए, तो आपको क्यों लगता है कि यूसीसी के लाने से ही नेशनल इंटीग्रेशन होगा? हो सकता है to an extent, but it is mandatory to bring in national integration is something we must pause and think about. These are the two major claims with of the people who say that there has to be a UCC. But the third one which says is, just a moment. Okay, the third one which says is that because other countries, the most developed nations, they already have UCC. Now, if you really want to copy European countries and otherwise, then we must copy them in other ways also in terms of language. हमें तो अंग्रेजी बोलनी है, हमें सारे अपने ऑफिशियल डॉक्यूमेंट्स अंग्रेजी में चाहिए. Those countries, they give primacy to their first language, right? So if you really want to copy other countries, there are a lot of other aspects also. And also those other countries, they don't claim to be unity in diversity or sarva dharma sambhava. So India does it. So we really have to see whether we blindly want to copy what other countries have done by adopting a uniform civil code, or what is the actual purpose. So even if Middle East, Latin America, they all have UCC, whether we really want it in India needs a lot of research. Now, these are the basic claims made by different people who are in favor of UCC. Okay, now let's try to understand what are the constitutional provisions relating to the same. Of course, we've got Article 44 specifically providing for it. Then we've got Article 37, which makes it non-enforceable, non-justiciable. But let's try to see what are the other constitutional provisions which have a bearing on the topic. We'll begin with the preamble. So preamble, when we talk about the first word, is secular. Now, secular was initially not added in the constitution. It was added by virtue of 42nd Amendment. Now, you have to understand the concept of secularism first. क्या आप ये बोल रहे हो secularism का मतलब होता है that state gives a damn about your religious rights. Whatever are your religious preferences, go and do whatever you want to, right? State will only interfere whenever it's against public order, health, or morality, right? So that is one way of looking at it, that secularism means state has no involvement. The other way of looking at it is that let the state come up with one law which is uniform to all of you and it is equally applicable to all. So we are a secular country और एक ही कानून है जो कि सब धर्म को follow करेंगे. So you have to see कि आपको कौन सा argument better लगता है, and then you can come up with your set of reasons that whether UCC is in harmony with the secular principle or not. Here I would like to quote even the triple talaq case judgment. So, you know, even the Supreme Court now, till now, is not having a unanimous view. So for instance, in triple talaq case, it was a constitution bench of 5 judges. So the minority opinion, of course, we cannot ignore. So there were 2 judges in the minority who clearly said that triple talaq, though it's a sinful practice, but it's not illegal. And it is not good, it is not correct for the judiciary to intervene into the personal practice of a religion just because it's sinful, right? So you have to see whether in the guise of secularism, you want to interfere into the personal law so much that the secularism has no meaning whatsoever. That is one. Also in the preamble, we've got words like justice, equal justice. So these are also the words which have bearing with the UCC concept. Now the second one is the 7th schedule. So 7th schedule list 3, entry number 5, which is the concurrent list, Samvarti Suchi. It gives power equally to the parliament and to the state legislature to legislate upon the matters pertaining to personal laws. तो संविधान आने से पहले जो भी जुडिशियल प्रोसीडिंग्स में पार्टीज पर्सनल लॉस को यूज कर रही थी ना, उन सब पर्सनल मैटर्स पे, मैरिज हो, अडॉप्शन हो, interstate हो, succession हो, in सब matters पे अब parliament and state legislature, they both have equal powers to make laws. So it somewhere, you know, gives power to the parliament to come up with UCC. Yes or no? Again, you as lawyers have to argue upon it. Now then again, we have articles 25 to 30, of course, which are allegedly most impacted if UCC at all comes into place. Again, here I would say whether your fundamental right to religion, you know, and UCC, do they at all have any connection? Because if you talk about religion per se, religion is very much a private affair. It's a very personal affair. एंड अगर सरकार कोई ऐसा कानून बनाती है जो आपके कुछ पर्सनल मैटर्स को रेगुलेट करता है, इज इट इसेंशियली द वायलेशन और इंटरफियरेंस इन योर फ्रीडम ऑफ रिलीजन? सो यू हैव टू फर्स्ट डिफाइन व्हाट एग्जैक्टली डू यू मीन बाय रिलीजन. So if you consider it to be a very private affair, then of course UCC is a violation of your fundamental freedom, right to freedom of religion. But if you think it's not, religion is not really a private affair, because 25 May you can even practice, profess and propagate your religion. You can take it out to the public domain. That way, if you see, agar ye public domain mein ja raha hai, then of course state can always regulate it. So of course 25 to 28 does have a little bearing. अब वो क्या वो bearing बहुत ज़्यादा है या कम है, that you have to again argue. Similarly, articles 29 and 30, because minorities, they are not very much in favor of UCC because they think that their individual identity will be at all diluted, because anyhow they are not very much recognized at the political front. So they think when the UCC comes in, their personal practices, their personal identity is further going to be diluted. So these are all the concerns which we must bear in our mind while standing in favor or against the concept of UCC. So these are the basic constitutional provisions which I wanted to discuss with you about UCC. Now let's try to quickly trace the brief history as to how UCC concept came into picture at the first place. So if we talk about Hindu law, basically, so it was found in the ancient texts. So it was in Vedas, we had scriptures, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Shruti, Smriti. So they all constituted Hindu laws. And these Hindu laws, they dominated almost every sphere of the human activity. So we agreed to be bound by such law, not only in our personal matters, but also in the matters of, say, political affairs, religious affairs, social affairs. So we agreed to be bound by such principles. Now, after we had Muslim rulers in our country, they did a very good thing. So they were very just to us. Us means non-Muslims here. So for the whole country, in terms of public law, they had the Islamic law. But for the private affairs, for all the non-Muslims, they said, we will not interfere. So if it was a matter pertaining to inheritance, adoption, succession, marriage, divorce, it was the personal law of that very community which regulated the affairs. So the Islamic law did not intervene in the personal matters. So that is why we can see there are a lot of researches, also articles written on it, that throughout the Mughal rulers, when they stayed in India, the personal laws, they actually nourished, they actually developed a lot. So that's how, and then Britishers, of course, came in India. Now, from here, things started changing. So after Muslim rulers, when the India was taken over by the Britishers, things changed. So we'll start with the Second Law Commission. So the Second Law Commission that was appointed in 1853, it was a seven members group headed by Sir John Romilly. They were asked to prepare a report कि इंडिया में procedural law किस तरीके से codify होना चाहिए. उन्होंने अपने रिपोर्ट में ये बताया कि for all the civil matters and for all the criminal matters, there has to be a uniform procedural law. That is why we have CPC and CRPC. So they were very clear about it कि in matters के लिए we have to have a uniform civil and criminal procedure code. However, they were very cautious even at that time. They said, लेकिन जो personal matters हैं ये अलग-अलग small communities के, we are not going to interfere in that. So all these personal matters, they are out of the purview. Let Hindus and Muslims and Christians decide how they want to deal with it. However, for the normal procedural civil and criminal, we are going to be responsible. The same thing was even reaffirmed after the 1857 revolt. So in 1857 revolt, as a result wherein the powers of the East India Company were transferred to the crown. So अगले साल 1858 में, so there was a proclamation issued by the crown which clearly said कि हमारी पब्लिक पॉलिसी ब्रिटिश इंडिया में क्या होगी, that we are totally going to not interfere in your personal affairs. So let your personal affairs be regulated by your communities. Rest and everything, we have our own laws to be applied. तो देखा जाए throughout this period, Britishers, they were very cautious that they did not want to interfere in the religious practices of the people. अब इसके दो reasons हो सकते हैं. पहला, it was not their priority because they had come to India to gain more and more economic power, right? So they wanted to basically expand the horizon of their power thing. They were not concerned about the religious thing. That is one. Second, I think they might have also presumed कि उस वक्त भारत में जितने भी हिंदूज थे, वो सब हिंदूज का एक ही कानून था, या जितने मुस्लिम्स थे उनका एक ही कानून था. तो उन्हें लगा ये लोग अपने आप डील कर देंगे. However, that was not the reality because there were a lot of inconsistencies within the practices of even Hindus as a whole or Muslims as a whole. Now, but with time, Britishers came up with two principles which sort of started modifying the personal laws of Hindus, Muslims, Parsis. Now, what were those principles? Now, the first principle is the principle of precedent or stare decisis, wherein the Britishers were very clear, you have your own personal laws. However, if the matter is coming to us, and then we set a precedent, then that has to be followed by the coming courts. So that ways, jo personal laws, it started to get codified somehow, because अब जो काजीज थे या जो बड़े बड़े हिंदू पंडित थे जो हर केस में अपनी इंटरप्रिटेशन दे रहे थे about their personal law, now that practice sort of started diluted because a precedent set ho gaya, now that has to be followed. That was one thing. Now the second thing that was the principles of justice, equity, and good conscience, which we till today follow in the constitutional courts. It clearly said, आपकी जो भी practices हैं as per your personal laws, we are not interfering. However, if you're coming before us in our courts, and if we find that your practices are against the principles of justice, equity, and good conscience, then we're going to strike it down. So these are the two principles which indirectly modified sort of or made the personal laws rigid then. Now, the Britishers had gone, we became independent. Now let's try to see how this personal law issue and the UCC issue came up after the independence. I hope you guys are with me, and in case you guys have any doubts or any questions, you can just drop that in the chat box. So now after independence, let's come to the Constituent Assembly debates. Of course, we had people representing Indian Muslim League at that point of time. We had some Muslim fundamentalists who did not want that the state should bring in UCC then and there. UCC fundamental rights में अगर आ जाता तो वो enforce हो जाता. So there were some Muslim members who did not want UCC to be there. तो उनके क्या arguments थे? I would want to quote one person here. It is Mr. Muhammad Ismail Sahib. He was representing Indian Muslim League from Madras. What did he say? He said, the right to follow personal law is the part of way of life. So personal law is nothing about just your practices of law. He said it is the very part of life of all the people who are following it. So if the state wants to interfere into it, it means the state is interfering in the right to life of those people itself. तो एक तरफ तो हम सेक्युलर स्टेट क्रिएट करना चाह रहे थे, एक तरफ हम कह रहे हैं कि लोगों के राइट टू वे ऑफ लाइफ में इंटरफियर करेंगे बाय लेजिस्लेटिंग अपॉन their पर्सनल लॉज. हाउ जस्टिफाइड वाज दैट? सो दैट वाज अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्गुमेंट व्हिच वाज बीइंग put forth by Mr. Mohammad Sahib. On the contrary, we had strong leaders like B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru who were very much in favor of UCC. They tried hard to push for it. However, they could not succeed. So as a result of the negotiation, we finally had UCC Part 4 as a directive principle. Now, post the constitution, the first effort to codify personal laws was the Hindu Code Bill, which came in 1950. It was introduced by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, but it actually faced stiff opposition क्योंकि पहली बार आप किसी के पर्सनल लॉ को कोडिफाई कर रहे हो, तो बहुत सारे हिंदू फंडामेंटलिस्ट जो थे they were not in favor of it. However, with time ये जो पूरा हिंदू कोड बिल था वो 4 कानूनों के तहत पास हुआ, which we call as Hindu laws now. It is Hindu Marriage Act, Succession Act, Adoption and Maintenance Act, and Minority and Guardianship Act. ये कानून तो आ गए, पर्सनल लॉ हिंदूज का कोडिफाई हो गया, उसके बाद भी कोडिफिकेशन रुकी नहीं. सो देयर वर अमेंडमेंट्स हैपनिंग ओवर एंड अगेन टिल नाउ. इफ वी सी वी आर मेकिंग अमेंडमेंट्स इन द हिंदू लॉज, aren't we doing it? So even by virtue of legislative interference or by Supreme Court judicial intervention, we are amending it. So let's just talk about fewer amendments that have happened in the personal laws. So first of all, you can talk about, of course, the Hindu Succession Act of 1956, wherein the daughters did not have the right to inherit the ancestral property until 2005 when the amendment was brought in. तो अगर इसका मतलब बहुत सिंपल है कि अगर आपने 1950 में कानून को कोडिफाई किया भी था पर्सनल लॉज को, जरूरी नहीं है कि आप उस टाइम पे जेंडर जस्ट लॉ ले आए थे. लाइक नाउ वी से दैट वी वांट टू ब्रिंग इन gender equality, we want to end social injustice, so you got this law in 1950s, still you could not do gender justice. It took you to reach till 2005 to do it. That is one example. अब हम कुछ और कानून देखते हैं जो कि एक्चुअली वी कैन नॉट से कि यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड है जो कि लेजिस्लेचर ने लागू किया है, बट इनडायरेक्टली वो कहीं ना कहीं सिविल लॉज में यूनिफॉर्मिटी जरूर लाते हैं. आई टोल्ड यू, यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड का मतलब जरूरी ये नहीं है कि यू हैव अ लॉ विच इज सेम फॉर ऑल. You may have different laws, but they have the same spirit, which is uniform. So let's try to see वो ऐसे कौन से laws legislature ने pass करे हैं which conform to the spirit of Article 44. Now, the first one I'll talk about is Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006. तो निर्भया केस के बाद इस एक्ट ने एज फॉर कंसेंट चेंज कर दिया. नाउ इट्स 18 years. राइट तो उस हिसाब से हिंदू मैरिज एक्ट में जो मैरिजेस में ये एज ऑफ कंसेंट नहीं थी तो वो ऑटोमेटिकली वॉइडेबल बन गई. सो आई थिंक इट्स अ ग्रेट मूव जेंडर इनजस्टिस को लाने के लिए, क्योंकि आपने प्रोहिबिशन ऑफ चाइल्ड मैरिज एक्ट में एज को चेंज किया. यू मेड द एज ऑफ कंसेंट फॉर 18 years. So you try to bring in a just gender law. The second example I will give you, for example, in Hindu Marriage Act, under section 13(2), which are additional grounds for the wife to, when she's seeking divorce. So the girl, she can repudiate the marriage, even if it was a child marriage, if consummated or not. तो अगर एक child marriage हुई थी, after attaining majority, the girl is free to repudiate the marriage, चाहे वो शादी consummated थी या नहीं थी. अगर ये लॉ कोडिफाइड नहीं होता जैसे बाकी हमारे धर्मों के लिए है, आई गिव यू एग्जांपल ऑफ पारसी, क्रिश्चियन एंड मुस्लिम, उसमें द गर्ल डज नॉट हैव दिस राइट. फॉर एग्जांपल, मुस्लिम लॉ में ऐसी सिचुएशन में बोथ द पार्टीज कैन रेप्यूडिएट द मैरिज अगर वो चाइल्ड मैरिज थी. तो अगर हम क्रिश्चियंस की बात करें तो ऐसा कोई प्रोविजन ही नहीं है. तो अगर आपकी चाइल्ड मैरिज हो गई, देयर इज नो प्रोविजन वेदर यू कैन रेप्यूडिएट इट एट ऑल और नॉट. एंड इन पारसी such marriages are void. So of course there is a benefit that you codified such law. I'll give you an example of this case called Mary Roy versus State of Kerala in 1986. इस केस में भी जुडिशियल इंटरवेंशन हैपन टू द एक्सटेंट कि कोर्ट ने सिविल लॉज में यूनिफॉर्मिटी लाने की कोशिश की. क्या बोला कि जो एक सीरियन क्रिश्चियन विमेन थी उसको पहली बार एक राइट दिया कि आप एंसेस्ट्रल प्रॉपर्टी को इनहेरिट कर सकते हो जितना कि आपके भाई कर सकते हैं. तो इससे पहले ये कॉन्सेप्ट क्रिश्चियंस में नहीं था दैट द विमेन वाज आल्सो अ को-पार्सनर, बट बाय वर्च्यू ऑफ दिस जजमेंट द सीरियन क्रिश्चियन विमेन वाज आल्सो गिवन इक्वल राइट्स इन द एंसेस्ट्रल प्रॉपर्टी जस्ट लाइक आवर ब्रदर्स हैड. Next example you can also take of Domestic Violence Act. Domestic Violence Act क्या है? Irrespective of your personal law practices, if you are a female and you've been subjected, you've been a victim of domestic violence, you have equal remedy as any other female. Now the next most important law which I will say, which is towards realizing Article 44, is the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act of 2000, amended duly in 2006. इसमें Supreme Court has given some amazing judgments wherein different religious women, they have the right to adopt a juvenile who's declared so under the act. तो 2006 में अडॉप्शन का मतलब क्या है इस एक्ट में, दैट वाज मेड क्लियर बाय द लेजिस्लेचर. इसमें एक जजमेंट आपको मैं कराऊंगी, मेड्रास हाई कोर्ट की, दैट्स जॉर्ज क्रिस्टोफर केस. उसमें पहली बार कोर्ट ने बोला कि इवन इफ अ वुमन इज अ क्रिश्चियन बाय बर्थ, she also has a right to adopt a juvenile. Before this judgment, she did not have such right. तो कोर्ट ने बोला, वी हैव टू सी व्हाट इज द वेरी पर्पस ऑफ दिस लॉ. हमें जुवेनाइल के इंटरेस्ट का ख्याल रखना है. तो अगर एक क्रिश्चियन औरत भी आगे आती है एंड शी वांट्स टू अडॉप्ट, व्हाई शुड वी रिफ्यूज? एंड court also hinted, Madras High Court also hinted that this is also one step towards realizing the principle enshrined in Article 44. The Madras High Court nowhere said that we have to have a separate legislation called UCC. The other case is Shabnam Hashmi versus Union of India 2014 by the Supreme Court. Here Supreme Court said that even a Muslim woman who's even single can adopt under the JJ Act. So it's a big step towards realizing Article 44 again. ये तो हो गए कुछ कानून जो कि डायरेक्टली यूसीसी नहीं है, बट उनकी स्पिरिट ऐसी है कि वो यूनिफॉर्मिटी लाना चाहते हैं. आई टेल यू देयर इवन सम लॉज जो कि they are not direct laws, I will say they are indirect laws passed by different state legislatures who are maybe that is not even a deliberate attempt, लेकिन वो कहीं ना कहीं आर्टिकल 44 की स्पिरिट से they are conquering. For example, I'll give you हरियाणा पंचायती राज एक्ट ऑफ 1994. उसमें क्लियरली लिखा है कि अगर कोई भी पंचायत के चुनाव में खड़ा होता है और उसके 2 बच्चे से ज्यादा हैं, तो that person is disqualified. You cannot even contest the elections. Don't you think that's a good move? Now, जब ये वाला कानून आया था, of course it had to be challenged by Muslims. So in the case of Javed versus state of Haryana in 2003, it was challenged by Javed. He said कि ये जो provision है, it is violative of our Muslim religion. So it is a violation of Article 14 on the ground of religion, because Muslims में we have polygamy. तो अगर एक इंसान ने 4 शादी भी करी है as allowed by their personal law, और सब wives के साथ अगर एक एक बच्चा भी procreate है, तो 4 बच्चे हो गए, so that person automatically becomes disqualified under the law. But the Supreme Court did not accept the contention. Supreme Court said, for the purpose of social welfare, we are free to do so. We can make a legislation like this. And if we do it, this is totally sound. This is totally constitutional. So this is also one way, of promoting monogamy. Even if you're not saying that polygamy is wrong, we are promoting monogamy. So indirectly also, different state legislatures are trying to bring in uniformity. We can also take example of Section 10 of the Indian Divorce Act of 1869, which is applicable to all the Christians throughout. So here, Section 10, what does it say? If a Christian woman, she wants to take divorce, what she has to prove in the court is that the man committed adultery plus, say, desertion, or adultery plus, say, cruelty. So she has to prove adultery, plus it has to be accompanied with some other ground also. But if a Christian man wants to seek divorce, he has to only prove adultery. Again, it is discriminatory of Article 14. So we had so much laws like this. We still have so many laws like this, and nobody's doing anything about it. But thanks to Justice K.K. Mathew then, so he suo motu took cognizance of Section 10, and he had sent a report to the Parliament in 1983. And he said, I quote, remove Section 10 now, or somewhere, some court will strike it down. And that's exactly happened. Parliament did not pay any heed over the report. In Kerala High Court's case of Amini versus Union of India, the court said, the Kerala High Court clearly said that Section 10 is violative of Article 14, and the law had to be changed. So it was declared to be unconstitutional. As a result of which, Parliament in 2001 came up with an amendment stating that now both men and women, those who are Christian, they have equal grounds of divorce. So now they are treated at par. So this is again a result of judicial intervention towards bringing in uniformity in the personal laws. You can also talk about Special Marriage Act here. Now, Special Marriage Act, I have a different way of looking at it. We say that we want uniform civil code to regulate the personal matters of different religious communities. So what is Special Marriage Act basically? Special Marriage Act is nothing but a uniform civil code pertaining to the matters of civil marriages. So anybody who wants to marry in different religions out of their personal practices, they are free to marry under Special Marriage Act. Now the problem is that a lot of people, they don't opt to marry under the Special Marriage Act. Again, the same concept. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had said that any uniform civil code has to be made voluntary. So we do have a special marriage act, which is nothing but a uniform civil code for marriages. Now, so these are the major judgments of the court and the major legislations. Apart from these, judicial intervention has been enormous in fewer cases which are very popular, which further necessitate the need to have arguments over UCC. Of course, it's Shah Bano case. Shah Bano case mein Supreme Court was very clear. It said that section 125 CRPC, the right to claim maintenance, is equally applicable to all, irrespective of the religion. So that was again a big move. You can talk about Daniel Latifi case also. So after the Shah Bano case, when this Muslim Women's Right to Protection on Divorce Act 1986 was passed, which said that 125 is out of purview of the Muslim women. So this act itself was challenged. It was alleged that it is violative of Article 14, 15, and 21. तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ये तो बोला कि आपका कानून वैलिड है, बट सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ये भी बोला that you have to harmonize the provisions of your law with section 125 of CRPC also. तो जो आप मेंटेनेंस दे रहे हो मुस्लिम women को, वो सिर्फ इतना ही नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप उसको इद्दत पीरियड में मेंटेन करें. The amount should be sufficient enough so as to maintain your divorced wife even in the times to come, even for the future times. So that's how court tried to harmonize. Now we had, of course, the infamous Sarla Mudgal judgment also here. Supreme Court, of course, was very strict for the practices that was prevalent, that, a Hindu married man changing the religion, changing to Islam, and then marrying others, marrying a Muslim person. So is the first marriage under Hindu Marriage Act, is it automatically dissolved? Or is the person accused of the offense of bigamy or not? So Supreme Court made these things very clear in Salga Mudgal case. It said even if you commit bigamy, you remarry after conversion to Islam, does not mean that your first marriage to a Hindu female under the Hindu Marriage Act is automatically dissolved. No. And also you can be booked under section 494 of IPC. That was again a move which was welcomed. Now, the last judgment that I would like to discuss here is, of course, the triple talaq one. इस केस में मुझे सबसे अच्छी बात ये लगती है that the petitioners were Muslims women's quest for equality. That is my purpose also, कि अगर आपको लगता है आपके personal law में कोई ambiguity है, कुछ discrimination है on the basis of gender probably, then you should come up instead of going in for a different law altogether. UCC जिसका अब तक ड्राफ्ट भी प्रिपेयर नहीं हुआ, जो कानूनों से आप इतने सालों से रेगुलेट हो रहे हो, if you think that there is something wrong with it, why don't you go to the court and challenge it? So triple talaq was challenged by this group of women, Muslim women, and they said that triple talaq, it is against their fundamental rights. अब इस केस में बड़ी फनी बोलो या ह्यूमरस बात थी कि the constitution bench had all 5 judges belonging to different religions altogether. So the decision was given by 3:1. 3 judges, they said that triple talaq's practice is unconstitutional. Even though it's been practiced and legalized by the personal laws for so many years, it is totally unconstitutional. However, the reasons for the same were given differently by all the 3 judges. तो इवन दो द फाइनल प्रोडक्ट वाज द सेम, लेकिन उनके जो कारण थे वो तीनों जजेस ने अपनी अलग अलग जजमेंट्स दी हैं. We should not forget about the minority view here, which I talked about before also. So Justice Kehar and Justice Abdul Nazir, they just said that triple talaq is not illegal, it is just sinful, because we cannot forget about the customs and the usages, right? So अगर आपको किसी sinful practice को change करना है, there's a different way of doing it. We as courts cannot interfere in your personal religious matters. So this is what about, we have different content about UCC, legislature ने क्या किया, judiciary ने क्या किया. अगर हम अब मुद्दे पे आए में क्या challenges हैं अभी, अगर हम UCC को लेके आना भी चाहते हैं, और अगर UCC को आप एक बिल में लेकर आ रहे हो या अलग अलग लॉज में आप कुछ कॉमन प्रिंसिपल्स इनकलकेट कर रहे हो, तो कैसे कर सकते हैं. पहली चीज हमें समझनी होगी डिफरेंसेस विद इन वन रिलीजन. जो मैंने आपको बताया कि ब्रिटिशर्स को भी शायद ये लगा था कि सब हिंदुओं का शायद एक ही कानून है, सब मुसलमानों का एक ही कानून है. तो यू टू अंडरस्टैंड कि एक रिलीजन में भी विद इन इंडिया, just because a state is different, there are a lot of differences. I'll give you a simple example. Hindu laws के हिसाब से Buddhist, Sikh और Jain, they are also Hindus. But जो Sikhs हैं, they don't consider themselves to be Hindus. I'll give you an example of this political personality, Prakash Singh Badal from Akali Dal. So in 2014, he was found burning the copies of the constitution, and he was even prosecuted against for this particular thing. He said, "हम सिखों को आप हिंदूज बोल रहे हो, we don't agree to it, and that is why I'm burning the copies of the constitution." तो अगर आप सोचो ऐसा politically matured figures अगर ऐसा कर सकती हैं, think about the common people. So what political message do you give to the people? तो सिख अपने आप को हिंदू नहीं मानते, तो कहीं ना कहीं वो कोर्ट में अपने कुछ ऐसे customs और usages को prove कर देते हैं. So customs take over the Hindu Marriage Act also. Similarly, talk about Jains for that matter. Jains also, they don't consider themselves to be Hindus. They are now given the status of being Alpsankyak in the country. Even they don't want to be called as Hindus. So this is something you have to first figure out कि आपकी की कंट्री में एक ही रिलीजन में जो इतने डिफरेंसेस है, पहले आप उन सब चीजों को ठीक करो, पहले उनको अकोमोडेट करो. आई विल आल्सो गिव यू एग्जांपल ऑफ मुस्लिम्स फॉर दैट मैटर. यू टॉक अबाउट द मुस्लिम प्रैक्टिसेस इन यूपी, इन पंजाब एंड कश्मीर, दे आर ऑल डिफरेंट. तो अगर in the same religion, just by virtue of being living in a different state, you have so much differences in the practices, how can you even think of bringing one single uniform law wherein the same law is applicable to all the religious groups, right? Because even within one religious groups, you have so many practices and principles going on for so many years. The second thing that you also have to answer here is the Hindu Code Bill. It was introduced in 1950s. उसके बाद हमारे 4 हिंदू लॉज आए थे. आज तक हम उसमें अमेंडमेंट्स कर रहे हैं, राइट? सो वी आर डूइंग अमेंडमेंट्स टिल नाउ. तो अगर हमने हिंदुओं को इतना समय दिया, 1950 में हमने उनका लॉ को कोड किया, अभी तक हम उनका लॉ चेंज कर रहे हैं. डोंट यू थिंक यू शुड गिव सिमिलर टाइम फ्रेम इवन टू अदर रिलीजियस कम्युनिटीज से लाइक मुस्लिम्स, पारसीज? पहले आप उनका भी तो लॉ कोडिफाई कीजिए. हिंदुओं को अपने 1945 में कोडिफाई कर दिया, you gave them enough time to get adapted to it. Muslims ka bhi, you first should codify their laws where there is no law at all, and then you give them enough time to get adapted to it. That is only when after those years that you can actually come up with UCC, because again Article 14 says that equality has to be amongst equals. So Hindus who were given a codified laws in 1950s and Muslims who've still not been given the codified law, do you think they are on the same footing? So don't you think it's a violation of Article 14? So you have to answer this question to yourself. I will just finish in another 5 minutes. You also have to address the concerns of Goa and Puducherry for that matter, because Puducherry, till now we have the civil code of the people of France. So the people living in Puducherry, they agree to be bound by the French laws, right? So वहाँ की practices और normal country में जो religious practices है, there's a lot of difference. For example, French law के हिसाब से अगर आपको शादी करनी है, your age is 18 irrespective of your gender, male or female. But अगर आप Hindu marriage में आएंगे, so it's 18 and 21. So again, these inconsistencies you have to deal with. If you talk about say Goa is the first state wherein you have the UCC still going on. तो वहां पर अगर आप मुस्लिम भी हैं और अगर आपने शादी करी है, you cannot practice polygamy because that's not allowed as per the UCC of Goa. So these are the inconsistencies that you first have to deal with before just coming up with UCC as the first. You should also have to address the fears of the minorities, because I told you minorities, they've already been so ignored for long, and of course they think that their identity, because it's only their practices which are secured by them, safeguarded by them. तो अगर state उसमें भी interfere कर लेगी, तो of course it's a matter of great debate. So you have to take care of their concerns also. आप कैसे कर सकते हैं? You have to involve the stakeholders. So whenever you want to have UCC कैसा होना चाहिए, उसमें क्या provisions होने चाहिए, you have to involve the stakeholders from different religious and minority groups also. Last मेरी submission ये है कि इतनी बहस यूसीसी होनी चाहिए नहीं होनी चाहिए, उस पर नहीं होनी चाहिए. फर्स्ट वी शुड हैव अ ड्राफ्ट यूसीसी इन हैंड. अब हमें पता ही नहीं है कि स्टेट कैसा कोड लेकर आने वाली है, whether it's going to be biased in favor of Hindus or Christians or Parsis whatsoever. So first, let the law commission be interested solely with the task of coming up with the draft law. Then only we can have a healthy discussion, because otherwise it is only on at the principal level, a hypothetical level that we are talking about. So I would just summarize by saying that what the Britishers in 175 years failed to do, or was probably afraid to do, what the Muslims in the course of 500 years refrained from doing. We should not give power to the state to do all that at once. I submit that we should proceed, but not in haste, but with caution, with experience, with statesmanship, and with sympathy. Thank you so much.
We are also thank you to you, Chani. And I first request to all the listeners to first listen the speaker's note, because most of the time the questions raised by you guys are being answered by them in their keynote. So as Sangreto raised a question, that was his third question. I think that was answered by Chandni while taking the Goa point. So I always request the listeners to first listen the keynote speaker, and then after that we have a time of 15 minutes. In that we'll be taking it. So Siddhi, today we will be taking it like this. Siddhi, I would like you to take up your question with Chandni first. If you can, if you are listening to me, Siddhi, yes,
Sir,
you
good
can
morning,
take up
sir.
the question.
Good
Good
morning, ma'am.
morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Ma'am, so my first question is, the various religious denominations are governed by personal laws and customary practices in India on matters of family law. So should UCC include all or some of the subjects such as marriage, divorce, adoption, succession, inheritance, etc.?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Siddhi. So again, see, the purpose of the lecture was not that I give my point of view, but if you want to ask about what I feel about it, I think we are not ready to have a UCC right now. I think we already have enough practices, and to consolidate all of them in the same law is not going to be a very sound decision considering the circumstances in the country already. What is intelligible here is that if you think that any practices whatsoever of your custom or of your community or religion, if you think that it is violative of Article 14 or 15 guarantees, you can always challenge in the court. It is not very intelligible to bring in all these matter in the UCC at this juncture.
Ma'am, but like you said that it is supposed to be voluntary and one can always opt out. So then do you think that it will lead to a lot of pending litigations? And if it is made voluntary, like आपने Goa example दिया, then it is not talking about equality at all, because if one has an option of opting out always, then what is the form of bringing point of bringing UCC at all?
So the same question we must ask ourselves when we talk about the Special Marriage Act also. What was the very object of bringing that law on the table, right? Because you may not have recourse to it while you're marrying somebody. So what was the very purpose of bringing in? So again, when you talk about the religious and the customary practices, these are very personal to somebody. So when you try to interfere in somebody's personal domain, people won't take it unless you give them enough space, enough time to talk about any matter whatsoever. The moment it becomes personal, the person needs space, they need time to understand and interpret. That exactly was the objective of the Special Marriage Act also. So if at all we think of having a UCC in the near future, first we should codify the Muslim laws so that they understand what is a codified law, they get adapted to it. So with the Christians and the Parsis, and over a period of time, when you think that all those laws, they have the same uniform principles, of the secularism, equality, justice, then only you can expect them to be following UCC in letter and spirit.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but considering that India being a democratic country, giving people that option, do you think is the right option to do that?
Option of making it, voluntary, whether you want to adhere to it or not.
But I'll give you an example. That was my next question. That there is a 2-year period for wait to finalize the divorce in Christian women. So, do you think that it is equal for them? Will you agree on that?
What did you say? So I understand the provision. What's your question?
That the 2-year period of wait for finalizing divorce violates Christian women's right to equality.
It indeed does, and I think this is high time that we should be challenging it in the courts of law. We should be doing that. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. Now I request. Sapna. If you are able to hear my voice, Sapna, you can raise your query. Sapna Sinha. Sapna,
Yeah, I'm here.
can you
I'm here.
hear me?
My first question has been answered by her.
Yeah.
She said we should go by the consensus. At least the government should lay down the draft bill before passing a law to it. So my first question is answered. My second question is, she says you say that Muslims did not interfere in the personal laws of the Hindus or others. But what about the forceful conversion? They did it, and even the conversion by the Christians was not interference.
So see, when I give one example stating that one religious community is not interfering with the other, does not mean that all the religions have followed it, right? So of course there are deviations to it. We have to see, but we have to answer a bigger question here. So conversions happening, one interfering with the other person's laws, that's a different question altogether. That should not be the subject matter of UCC. The UCC, whether should be there or not, it's a different question. We should just see whether we are ready to have one such law or not, or the laws already at place which are working as uniform civil code for now, are they ineffective or are they effective? So what are the, so these are the things which we must answer before thinking that what is one religion doing with the other. That is not even the question here, you know.
No, no, no.
I think
You were going by the history, and you quoted the history, and you said
Mhm.
that the Mughals did not intervene in the personal laws, and they let us practice the personal laws,
Yeah,
and even the Christians did it. That's why I asked you.
definitely. Yeah,
Otherwise,
that is
it's
of
nothing to
course.
do with the UCC, of course,
Yeah,
Since
of
you,
course. I get it. So I just picked up one example which I thought, you know, that would have been more apt here. Of course, whatever you're saying, that is also justified, but I went with the bigger picture. That's it.
okay, that's your thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
so
fine.
yeah, that's
You're
exactly was my objective. That
but
so in the beginning of the lecture I clearly said my objective is not to you know, put forth my opinion. I just wanted to give you enough material so that you can brood over the topic, so you can at least make an informed decision whenever you stand in favor or against the coming bill or the law.
right. Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, and we have.
Mhm.
And can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Senator, can you hear me?
Hello, am I audible? Hello,
Two questions.
am I audible? I have a couple of
If
questions.
I should
The voice is breaking.
which I said by and the yeah, you can
Yeah, I would
yeah,
request you if you can kindly, because it's getting inaudible.
can you
I'll just quickly, good afternoon, ma'am. This is Shankrito. If I'm audible, I just have a couple of questions on the whole applicability of the UCC.
I think Chandani has left. She's not there. Nitish is not audible, and the Chandani has left.
Yeah, Nitish sir, आपकी ना voice crack कर रही है बहुत ज़्यादा. There's a lot of disturbance coming.
I'll just see. She's here. She's here. I'm doing her. Okay. Is it fine now?
No, sir.
Not
It's
yet.
not clear.
She's not there, probably.
She's not there. She's left her. And thank you so much, Nitish, for organizing it. I'll also take a leave. Okay, thank you. Thanks to Chandani also.
Yeah. Bye. Just let me check. Thank you.